What if a single teacup could decide the fate of a nation? This is the real chilling story of how Captain Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, came within inches of death. Not on a battlefield, but in the calm shade of a courtyard. From a soldier carrying tea, the attempt was silent, surgical, invisible. Poison slipped into a cup, trust placed in the wrong hands. But what happened next wasn't chaos. It was calculation. In that quiet moment, Traoré didn't just survive. He exposed a traitor, uncovered a conspiracy, and sent a message to every enemy watching. Lions do not sip blindly. If you love Undercover Boss-style reveals, political thrillers, or powerful real-life leadership moments, you won't forget this one. Watch until the end to understand why this story is about more than poison. It's about the price of loyalty, the burden of leadership, and the quiet strength of a man who refused to fall. They say history is shaped by great wars, towering speeches, and the rise and fall of empires. But sometimes, it's a single cup of tea. The sun was high over Ouagadougou, casting long shadows beneath the wide canopy of a mango tree. Beneath it, the circle of officers sat in light conversation, laughing, discussing logistics, sharing plans. The air was calm, ordinary. Nothing seemed out of place. Except for one thing, the tray I was carrying. I was dressed like any young soldier. Standard. Uniform, boots laced, movements quiet. To everyone else, I was invisible. Just another boy with tea. But that day, I wasn't just carrying refreshment. I was carrying something far more dangerous. One cup on that tray held VXT-42, a synthetic poison, tasteless, odorless, fatal within minutes, meant for only one man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. When I reached him, he looked up, not with suspicion, not with arrogance. He smiled. A real smile. The kind you don't fake for cameras or crowds. And then, he paused. The cup in his hand, untouched. Didn't drink? His eyes locked with mine. Not accusing, not surprised, just knowing. That's when the silence shifted. Something in the air changed, thicker, heavier. As if everyone in that circle suddenly felt it too. The presence of danger, quiet and invisible. He placed the cup down slowly, and then, without raising his voice, Captain Traoré spoke. Not just to me, but to everyone around him. He spoke of small things that carry great danger. Of trust, of betrayal, of how power doesn't always come with a roar. Sometimes it comes with a whisper. That day, a single teacup almost ended a presidency. But what happened next would expose something far more terrifying than poison, a betrayal from within. They told me it would be simple. Those were the first words I whispered to myself that morning, the words that kept echoing even as my hands shook holding the tray. I wasn't a killer. I was a cadet, fresh, obedient, invisible. That's what made me perfect. That's why Colonel Konate chose me. I had no history, no voice, no reason to be noticed. Just another young man in uniform, trained to follow orders without question. All I had to do was wear the uniform, walk calmly, and hand out tea. Nothing more. But I knew the truth the moment they gave me the vial. Just a drop, the colonel said. You won't even see it mix. It's called VXT-42. One sip and he won't make it to lunch. My heart thudded like a drum in my chest. The courtyard was set. The mango tree's wide branches offered shade, almost like it was trying to shelter us from what was coming. Officers laughed about supply routes and strategy, while I moved between them like a shadow. On my tray were 8 cups, 7 harmless, 1 lethal. They had made it look so routine, so normal. Konate himself was calm, sipping his own tea early, smiling, nodding, watching, as if this was all just another briefing. But I could feel the tension in my bones, the tightness in the air. Then I approached Captain Ibrahim Traoré, our lion, our leader, the man so many feared and followed. He looked up, he smiled, and right then, the plan that seemed so calculated, so precise, began to crack. Because he didn't just take the cup. He paused, and I realized something terrible. He saw me. Not The uniform, not the tray me. Captain Ibrahim Traoré held the cup gently, his fingers resting on the ceramic as if feeling for something deeper than heat. Around him, the officers continued their small talk, but the rhythm of the moment had shifted. They didn't know it yet, but he did. He didn't lift the cup, he didn't take a sip. Instead, he stared, not at the tea, at me. It wasn't anger in his eyes, or fear. It was something more dangerous, awareness. I lowered my gaze, trying to blend back into the uniform, the role I'd been given, but I could feel it unraveling. The confidence I had rehearsed turned to cold sweat. Across the circle, Colonel Konate's voice broke the silence. "Please, sir," he said with practiced ease, "the tea is fresh, meant to be casual and normal." But there was nothing normal about the way Traoré set the cup down, slowly, deliberately beside him on the table. His calm voice followed, quiet, but sharp as a blade. "You know, the smallest things carry the greatest danger," he said, his eyes now sweeping the circle. "A wire can trigger a bomb. A whisper can spark a war. A sip." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The room changed. Smiles faded, hands tensed. It was as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees under the shade of that mango tree. Then he turned his attention to Colonel Konate. "Tell me, Colonel, do you trust the people who pour your tea?" Konate's smile faltered. "Of course, sir. Why wouldn't I?" Traoré's gaze lingered. "Because I don't." And that's when I knew. The lion had seen the trap, and now he was watching to see who would flinch first. The air under the mango tree thickened like smoke before fire. Captain Traoré didn't move like a man in danger. He moved like a man delivering judgment. He turned his head slightly, calling over his aide, not with urgency, but with a voice that knew exactly what it was doing. "Would you mind drinking from this cup instead?" The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was terrifying. I froze. Across from him, Colonel Konate sat too still. His grip on his own cup tightened, his jaw clenched. And then, too fast, too loud, he said, "No, wait." That was all. Took. The atmosphere cracked. Two soldiers behind me were suddenly in motion. Hands on my arms, wrists bound with practiced efficiency. I didn't resist. There was no point. The game was over. Someone reached down to my boot, pulled out the small glass vial I'd hidden there. Red labeled, VXT42. The poison that wasn't supposed to leave a trace had now become the clearest evidence of all. And yet Captain Traoré didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. He simply stood, tall and steady, eyes scanning the circle of men who had sat at his side moments before. "I've led soldiers into real battles," he said. "But this was a battle for the soul." He wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to them. The men who had watched silently, who had smiled beside a traitor, who had laughed as death circled their cups. And in that moment, I understood something brutal and beautiful. I was never the weapon. I was the test. And I had failed, because loyalty isn't tested in war. It's tested in the quiet. Hours later, I sat alone in a cold, windowless room. My wrists ached from the restraints, but the sting in my chest came from something far deeper: shame. Colonel Konate, the man who gave the order, was already in custody. He denied everything, claimed innocence, blamed the system, said he didn't know me, had never seen the vial, but lies like poison leave traces. We didn't need confessions. We had proof. In my bag, tucked beneath spare socks and a handwritten letter to my mother, they found a black notebook. Not large, not flashy, but heavy. Not with weight, but with consequence. Inside were codes, transfer numbers, lists of meetings, names. One name came up again and again, circled in red ink like the center of a spider web. Lacal. They called him the Jackal. Cold, precise, invisible. A man who didn't kill with bullets but with whispers, bribes, and silence. An architect of chaos. Captain Traoré stood behind the glass as we reviewed the notebook. "Have we heard that name before?" he asked quietly. Yes, one of the aides said. It came up in a foreign intelligence intercept months ago. French consulate area, unconfirmed. Traoré didn't blink. But something in his posture changed. His back straighter, his breath deeper. This was no longer just about Konate or about me. It was about someone else, someone bigger. A shadow hiding in the halls of diplomacy, using men like me as chess pieces on a board we couldn't even see. Later that night, in a secure underground war room, no journalists, no ministers, just 4 men and a mission, we laid the notebook, flat on the table like it was a loaded weapon. The soldier was just the hand, I said. Konate was the tool, Traoré nodded slowly. Then find the head. They called me Lakal, the jackal, not because I was savage, but because I was surgical. I didn't leave trails. I left echoes. I didn't kill with noise. I killed with certainty. That's why they hired me. Traoré was becoming a problem. Not, for me personally, I don't fear symbols, I fear stability. And that's what he brought. To men who profit from chaos, order is a threat. The first plan was elegant. A courtyard, a soldier, a single poisoned cup. No blood, no sound, just silence. I left nothing behind. No fingerprints, no messages. Not even the boy knew what he carried. That's the beauty of control. You never need to raise your voice. But then the silence cracked. The boy was caught. The poison exposed. Konate, my man on the inside, collapsed under pressure like wet parchment. Useless. They arrested him in whispers and buried him in a cell built for secrets. No trial, no names. Just shadows. That was when I knew the plan had failed. Not because of the poison, but because Traoré didn't drink. He watched first. That's when I knew I had underestimated the lion. I disappeared, but not fully. In a place like Ouagadougou, you don't vanish. You adapt. You shift shape. Apartment. No cameras. Unmarked clothes. Different car every 2 days. I used numbers, not names, never the same street twice. I was careful. But someone was watching. It wasn't immediate, it came in small signals, a delivery boy who paused too long. A phone that rang once, then never again. A knock on the wrong door. They were closing in. Still, I had one last play. One final performance, one more mask, and this time I would bring the cup myself. Not through a boy, not through a traitor, through me, face to face. The room was small, private, exclusive. No cameras, no guest list, just whispers in the right ears. Enough to lure a ghost like me out of hiding. It was bait, and I took it. Not because I was desperate, because I was curious. Curious to see the man who had dismantled my plan without ever raising a weapon. The man who turned a cup of poison into a symbol of survival. I entered like I always did, quietly, unnoticed. A server, a waiter, clean hands, crisp collar, tray balanced with practiced grace. I moved like I belonged, my pulse steady, my mask intact, until I reached the table and he looked up. Not in surprise, not with fear, but with recognition. Would you like to share a drink with your president? Captain Ibrahim Traoré asked, his voice low even. I froze. For the first time in years, I hesitated. He stood slowly, never breaking eye contact. You've been running for a long time, Alexandra. He said my name, not my code, not my alias. My name. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about assassination anymore. This was about presence, about being seen, about who would flinch first in the dance between predator and prey. But he wasn't the prey. He never was, because while I had been hiding behind shadows and masks, Traoré had stood in the sun, with scars and silence, and a gaze sharp enough to cut through steel. I could have run. I didn't, because even a jackal knows when the hunt is. For in that quiet room with no guards, no guns, no orders shouted, I met the lion and I bowed. They didn't tell us much, just fragments, whispers in the corridors of the military academy, tension thick in the air. Another attempt. The jackal caught. The president, almost. But no names, no photos, just silence. Until he walked in. Captain. Ibrahim Traoré didn't arrive in fanfare. No motorcade. No bodyguards flanking his every step. Just him, clad in a simple cotton tunic calm as a mountain. He stepped onto the platform beneath the morning sun. We, the cadets, stood in formation. The future, they called us. But at that moment we were statues, holding our breath, waiting. In his hand, he held a ceramic teacup. It looked ordinary, plain white, harmless, but the way he held it, firm, steady, reverent, it was as if he were holding the weight of a nation. "This cup," he said, voice clear, steady, "almost ended my life." No one moved. "Not because of what was in it," he continued, "but because of who I trusted to carry it." He didn't name the soldier. He didn't shame the traitors. That wasn't his way. Instead, he looked at us, each of us, as if weighing the soul beneath our uniforms. He spoke of betrayal, of silence, of vigilance, of how leadership isn't about being followed, but about not being fooled. He told us the truth, that enemies don't always wear foreign uniforms, and that poison doesn't always come in a bottle. It can come in smiles. Then, with deliberate grace, he placed the cup on a stone pedestal beside the Academy's flag. "This is no longer a symbol of death," he said. "It is a symbol of survival." Some cadets saluted. Others whispered, "I'll never forget this," and they won't. Because that day we didn't just learn about strategy or defense. We learned what it means to carry the weight of trust, and to never let it slip from your hands. That night, long after the ceremony ended and the Academy grounds fell silent, he stood alone on the rooftop of the presidential palace. There were no guards beside him, no press, no speech to deliver. Just a man wrapped in night air, watching. The distant line where earth met sky. Captain Ibrahim Traore, the lion they called him. But tonight he looked more like a man than a symbol. A man who had faced death twice in one day, once by poison, once by betrayal, and lived not only to survive but to teach. In his hand he held nothing, no sword, no pen, not even the cup, and yet the weight he carried was enormous. Inside the palace the air had changed. It wasn't fear or panic, but purpose, strategy, resolve. Traitors had been rooted out, cells dismantled. But Traore knew, better than to celebrate, because he understood something most leaders ignore, that danger doesn't end with one arrest, or even with one speech. It hides in the habits of power, in the comfort of routine. It waits, in silence, in shadows, in men who smile too easily. He didn't seek vengeance. He sought clarity. He wasn't angry that someone tried to kill him. He was angry that someone believed they could do it and no one would notice. As the city lights blinked in the distance, like stars that had chosen to land, Traore closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't peace. This was preparation, because leadership, he had learned, isn't about surviving attacks. It's about standing still while the world spins around you and refusing to bow, no matter how hard it tries to make you. Even a cup of tea can hold betrayal or resilience. The difference lies in who holds it. And the lion of Burkina Faso, he still held it steady. He didn't scream. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't even flinch. When Captain Ibrahim Traore realized someone had tried to kill him, he didn't react with fury. He responded with clarity. He exposed the traitors quietly. He warned his nation calmly. And he turned the very object meant to end his life into a national symbol of resilience, a teacup. What was meant to carry death now carries a message. That true leadership isn't loud. It doesn't need a podium. It reveals itself in silence, in restraint, in knowing when to act and when to simply watch. So if you've ever doubted the power of presence, of stillness, of instinct, remember the man who looked betrayal in the eye and didn't blink. If this story moved you, comment below what you felt. Share it with someone who needs to remember that the greatest power often speaks the softest, because in a world of noise, the lion is the one who waits and survives.